Now, before we move on to our next application, let's take a quick tour of PyCharm. So PyCharm has so many features, it's very hard to just sit down and show them to you. But let's just take a moment and hit the highlights. So on the left over here, we have our project folder, and this can be quite complex. In real apps, you might find many subdirectories, multiple files, all sorts of stuff. We'll get to that later. But here we just have our directory and our program.py. It actually shows the external libraries that are set up into the particular Python environment that we're working with. So you can see that we have things like Pigments and Chameleon, which is a web templating framework, and MailChimp for managing subscribers, things like that. Not super important for us now, but this sort of lets you get at your active Python environment. We can also go over to the structure, and the structure for this app is frankly boring because it just has a few variables and that's it. But if we had functions, which we're using classes, and these classes were defined with more functions and fields and attributes and properties and all those kinds of things, you would see this would actually be quite interesting. You can use all these little pieces up here to slice and dice them. Down at the bottom, we have our run configuration, or a place where we run our app. You can see there's actually two of them running. That's kind of a problem. We'll talk about how to fix that. So we can come down here, we can run it, we can stop the running ones. You can see this one has a green dot because it's running, so we can stop this. That's all good. We can also have to-dos, so we could come over here and put a comment. Comments in Python start with hash, so I could say to-do, this needs cleaned up, something like that. And I could say something like to-do. All right, so now if you look down here, you can see it actually shows us our to-dos. PyCharm highlights them very nicely up here. We'll take those back out, but that's what this section is for. Here's just a Python console. You can, as if you typed Python in the terminal or a command prompt. Here's literally a terminal. And here's the version control that we talked about. There's support for all different kinds of version control. You can see we were actually working on the master branch in GitHub. Over here on the right, we have a database section. Some really excellent database management and design and querying tools built into PyCharm. We don't have a database that we're working with right now, but if we did, we'd connect it here and we could do all sorts of cool stuff. Finally, we have sort of our run, debug, and manage version control shortcuts up here. Come up here and we can look at the configuration. You can see we can actually pass parameters. Like if I want to just hard code a name and pass it like this, this would be passed to our program when it runs. We're not going to do that, but we could. You can pick which version of Python you want to run, pass additional options to the interpreter itself. There's all kinds of things that we can do here. Remember, we had two instances of that app running. That was kind of weird. So we can check off this single instance only, and that actually fixes that problem. So you'll only ever have one running at a time. Now, when I run it, if it's running and I try to run it again, it'll say, we're just going to restart it for you. So I often say, don't bother me about that. Just run it again whenever I ask, okay? So like I said, there are many, many things you can do with PyCharm. Stuff with version control, stuff with managing virtual machines, all kind of stuff that we just don't need to get into right now. But what you saw should give you a really good jump start so you can be effective with PyCharm right away.